do whatever you got to do. All right, good everybody. Good morning, everybody on Zoom. We got a good turnout today, which means I better not screw this up. And if you can turn your cameras on, I get to see the TV in the back here, so don't be shy. It's okay. And if you shouldn't turn your camera on, don't.
I'm not shy. I just don't want to break the camera.
Oh, because they're too pretty, right? I always like to start these with doing something good. So whether you're on Zoom or in here, if you got something cool to share, personal, professionally, I like to start it that way. Kind of sets the tone. So who's got something cool to share? Eric Peterson.
I do.
Oh, 1 second, Paigey.
I was gonna say, I want to give a shout out to Paul Schultz here. You know, we always talk about the fortune is in the follow-up. Paul took a list and buyer this week that he's been nurturing for 6 months off an open house and signed a buyer that he'd been working for 2 years to get to that point. So
say something because Paul and I met with them, and then after Paul left, that client shared the story.
They didn't really want to work with them. You want to work with them, right?
No. Like I think she indicated 3 years, and she was just like, before I even told him that I was going to use him, like I already knew that I was going to use him. I didn't know when, but yeah, she talked with me and gave me the whole story of your follow-up for 3 years, according to her. But obviously, time's been a little blurry these last couple of years.
Yeah.
So yeah, no doubt about it. He deserves all the credit on that.
What that stands for is when you think you're bugging somebody, here's a validation that I don't even care if you are bugging him. He already knew he was going to use them. So we're going to talk a little bit about it today. The market's a little bit different right now, right? Mm-hmm. Patience is going to be required. Consistency is going to be required. Follow-up is going to be required because maybe the pace that people are making decisions is shifting a little bit. It doesn't make it bad. It just makes it, we just need to nurture it a little bit more. So good work, Paul. Well, Paigey?
Yes, I have several, but I'm going to start with the most important one. Today is birthday of a very special person in my life, Wendy, and she is just amazing. And I have been blessed.
I see you're standing up in the team meeting room. All right. Well, happy birthday, Wendy. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
And also, I would like to thank all the leadership. I have been part of many organizations that have had leaders, and by far, you guys are the best. And from every office, you guys go above and beyond to help us achieve our goals and help our clients and our teams.
I appreciate that, Paigey. I'll send you $20 later.
I thought it was 200.
I appreciate all of our leadership teams across all 5 markets at this point. If you haven't heard, John and I have now taken on Eden Prairie as well. So I want to make sure that we welcome them as well. So, all right. All right. We got a lot to cover today. So I want to first off thank Tim Saprell, who is an agent out of the Minneapolis Lakes office, who helped pull together a lot of the data that we're going to see today on the marketplace. He's a sharp guy, a lot of business acumen, and a lot of really great previous experience prior to being in the business for quite some time and doing a lot of business. So he may pop in here and there. I told him jump in whenever he wants, but we're going to kind of walk through a little bit of what we're seeing in the marketplace, because what my gut says is you can find whatever information that you want to justify whatever story you want to tell. We're in a really ambiguous time with regards to what the numbers look like, this conversation of a shift. But I think we all agree that something's different than it was a couple of months ago. At least majority of the conversations that I'm having. So I want to walk through a handful of things. Tim, you're welcome to jump in. Anybody's willing to jump in and kind of share what they're experiencing. I want to walk through just a few of the numbers first, so we have some context to go off of. And then I want to have this to be a conversation of how are we adapting? What do we need to do in a shift? How many were in the market in 2008? Okay. There's always like some like underlying remark, like, yeah, I remember that. So what I've learned is a big percentage of agents have never experienced a shift in the marketplace besides trending upward and COVID. I mean, we all experienced uncertainty in COVID, but that wasn't driven by any normal event. So that's what I want to talk about today, is some of the things that we just need to forecast both strategically and mentally to prepare ourselves to be able to thrive, because I think actually this idea of a recession scares people. And the reality is it is, I'm not just saying this as a cliche, it is an opportunity for the committed and skilled real estate agents in the business. 100%. The people that are going to be here just for a couple of deals probably aren't going to hang out, which opens up the pool. So, all right, can we dive in? Before we dive in, you guys have noticed that we've offered trainings from all 5 market centers, and what that allows us to do is just pull from a bigger pool of agents, of resources, of people that maybe aren't even in our 5 market centers. So Charlie Saleh is the general manager out in Milwaukee, and they've built one of the biggest brokerages in all of Wisconsin. And he's going to talk about Charlie. What I love about Charlie is his very direct demeanor. Like, he's not going to sugarcoat it. So if you're available, that'll be tomorrow at 11 a.m. on Zoom, which you'll get the communications from your leadership teams if you're interested on that. And then the second one is, when we're looking at branding, when you're looking at putting out things, particularly on social media, Command Designs makes it easy, and they continue to make progress on that. So if you're not familiar with it, it's been simply. So that's on June 28th at 11 on Zoom as well. All right. So it's always good to consider what are our clients thinking? The reality is it always accurate? Because they're getting fed from sources that there's typically going to be agendas behind it. And the challenge with that is the context. I can give you numbers without context, and all of a sudden you run with a completely different story than what is actually showing up. Doesn't make it right or wrong, but the reality is the story behind it. You look at the economy as a whole, everybody thinks it's driven by metrics. It's driven by human behavior. It's driven by fear. It's driven by uncertainty. So you start to see shifts in the marketplace. It's not because any particular number, it's because we're a herd mentality and we follow what everybody else that we know is doing because we don't want to be followed. So when we look at this, there's a lot of clients that are wondering what's going to happen. Is it going to crash? Anybody experiencing these conversations yet? Mm-hmm. Okay. So part of the reason we're going to go through this is for you to be able to articulate the numbers with context to help them give just a basis for what are your goals? Here's what we're seeing. Here's what we think the best direction to go would be. Okay. Buying opportunities. How high are the rates going to go? Does anybody know that?
No.
Let's not act like we do. There's this, I have this really strong tug of war of seeing agents put on about stuff like they can predict what's going to happen with the rates. That's not our job. Our job is just to take what's happening and help advise the clients based on what's happening right now, because the reality is we don't know. We would have never guessed 2 weeks ago what happened last week was going to happen. Just couldn't expect. There's no way for any of us to do that. So the multiple offers situation, which is that changing? A little bit. Depends on the area, depends on price point. The reality is when we're looking at it across the board, instead of 15, maybe there's 4. Which that might sound okay, but that's a big drop. Okay. All right, next. So Tim put this one on here. So this was something Drew Lee, who is a great coach with forward coaching. He said about the first quarter that the first 90 days have been some of the most challenging that he's ever seen as a coach. And what's interesting is when we look at the data, the first 90 days, that was a struggle, right? There was a lot of challenges with getting offers accepted with the inventory. We're starting to see that shift just over in the past month and a half. So next slide. So how much has really changed? We want to look at multiple factors, not just the closed units, but what are the leading indicators? Mortgage applications is where it starts, at least from a tracking perspective. So, I mean, are you guys seeing a drop in mortgage applications?
We sure did, and it was super quick.
Yeah. So
Good news though, last week we were up a little bit, you guys. People that are serious right now and the people that we've got coming in are solid, phenomenal, want to get out there. We get it. We got to do it now. Yeah, so that's good.
yeah, for sure. And there's going to be ebbs and flows, but overall, this is an indicator that we're seeing slowing a little bit. Tim, did you have anything in particular to add on that point?
Not yet.
Okay, you're just waiting to pounce. I can feel it.
I got my eyes on you.
I know you do.
Keep you in check.
Go ahead, sorry.
We'll keep you in check. Doing great.
Listings and sales data, you can actually see some consistency. And right now, we don't know if it's a trend or a mirage because it's short term. So this is where we just kind of have to interpret some of the data as well and make the most sense of it without making it definitively one way or another. Because when I talk of it this way, I'm not judging people. What I'm judging is be careful of putting out information that just supports your own agenda. Because that's not true guidance and that's not true fiduciary. So when people are saying the market hasn't changed at all, either they haven't sold anything or they're not looking at any data. And I'm not judging, yet the reality is you could put yourself at risk if you're not careful and hurt your long-term business if you don't understand the economics behind what's happening right now. It's not as critical when you're seeing the market do this because everybody's making more money. But I promise you in 2008, you better know your numbers because nobody was making any money. So it was a really interesting time where you had to be prepared to just give the information, you make your decision. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is one that I'm sure Tim will jump on, but we have quarter two of 2022 versus 2021. This is year over year through these dates with the asterisks. So new listings, it's about a 9% spread, and pended is about a 0.2% spread. But you notice with this increase of new listings and the number of current actives, we know the inventory is different. Now, keep in mind this is 7-county metro. So there's going to be pockets. I talked to a guy yesterday that he's got clients looking for under 3 million. I realize this is luxury, but I want you to keep this into context. Is under 3 million, he's having a very difficult finding property for somebody. So it's different for every market. It's different for every price point. Tim, anything you want to add on this screen?
No, I just realizing the headline might be a little confusing, but yeah, we're just comparing 2022 to 2021 and how quarter one and quarter two look different. And before I pulled the numbers, well, I mean, I pull them every week, so I had some knowledge, but I guess I wonder if a lot of people would think that maybe the pendants would be down more, given that we've been in a higher rate environment for a while now. But so far, not really. they've been pretty consistently hovering around, off about 11% every week since the beginning of the year. And I suppose that maybe some people might think that we would have seen more new listings. And what's interesting is 2 weeks before Memorial Day, we actually had more new listings that week than we have had in 2 years. And I was thinking that might be the beginning of, us seeing more sellers putting stuff on. And then, of course, the following week was the week before Memorial, and it dipped, which I figured it would, because I think we could agree a lot of people hold back listing right before a holiday like that. But in the week since Memorial, it hasn't panned out. There haven't been a big increase in new listings. It was just that 1 week.
It hasn't rebounded as it typically does.
No, it's similar to last year, and basically. So here we are, just up 1% through the, just about the entire Q2 compared to last year. I mean, it's been almost flat. We've almost, we've almost had the same new listings come on in Q2 than we did a year ago.
So if we're reading into this, the context is it seems like the pendant number is also similar, but if we're about the same in actives, the logical part is there as many buyers looking? You agree?
That's right. Yeah, and that's where we have to rely on our conversations in the office, and I think we've had a lot of those, and it indicates that, we've seen it cool off.
Yeah. Any thoughts around that? Sure.
So we've seen, which I'm sure you agents have seen too, we're following up with all of our clients in our database that we're looking, that are pre-approved, and some of them have just said, it's just too much. We're going to sit back and wait. And so we have a calendar where we're going to go in. Of course, we talked to the agent, and they've said the same thing and reiterated. We've tried to talk to them and kind of keep them more motivated and saying, hey, just keep looking at your list. So they're not quitting, but they're not, you can see they're not going in it as much to look at the listings.
That could be part of the human decision-making process as we
Yeah.
start looking at this, like the velocity of people making decisions has, with some, this is not an absolute statement, but it's changed.
I would say, for us, it's definitely changed the front end conversations to reality and, leading indicators versus lag, like they're seeing on the news every day. And, they've heard the stories with their friends. It's also changed the conversations around performance of buyers. And they may have been willing to pay 20% more in a multiple offer situation. Now they're not in that multiple offer situation. And they might have to pay 20% more because rates are up, but it doesn't change the need when the buyer is ready, willing, and able, because we've nurtured them. 100%. And so you have to be able to frame those conversations differently based upon need versus want, and without judgment, help them realize that outcome that they would have had in monthly payment being this dollar amount is going to be the same, whether they paid up for something or bought at the current price with a worse rate.
Yeah. Chris Suarez, long time ago, said there's 3 components, and I think it's in our MREA as well, but buyers are going to buy when they need to, want to, and are able to. And all 3 of those have to align. Because as much as we know, real estate is a significantly strong financial tool and investment for wealth, most people don't make the decision based on finances alone, right? So it's family changes, it's, kids are being born, kids are leaving the house is too big, the house is too small. There's other reasons outside of just the financial component that people are buying houses more often than not. So although the financial structure might have changed for them a little bit, if there's still all those 3.
Ready, willing, and able.
Ready, willing, and able.
And shift.
Yep. all of that stuff, people are still gonna move. It's gonna look and feel different.
Just based on what everybody said, I think it kind of, to understand a customer, client, buyer, seller, want to understand their incentive structure. And what you just outlined was a non-financial incentive structure, and that's permanent in my opinion, right? There was a uniquely strong incentive structure put in place during COVID that manipulated the cost of capital. Sure. And now that has changed. And so the way Eric broke it down, you can help somebody understand that their incentive structure might still be identical based on the price you'd pay today and the cost of capital today versus paying $20,000 over, and the cost of capital was something different. And so although these numbers don't really surprise me now, they would have if you asked me last year. But there is the reality that about 80% of current mortgage holders have a rate under 4. And so they needed some type of incentive structure in order to leave that cost of capital and trade it for a different rate at a different home. And it doesn't need to be financial, but finding out somebody's desires is their incentives. And that's just like super important when you're taking a look at everything.
Totally. And that's where you're understanding the needs of the clients, right?
Yes, and it's pleasure versus pain. Are they purchasing a home because of a pleasure activity happening in their family? Like, did they have a baby? Did they get a new job? Or is it pain where they've lost a job? And, you know, there's always going to be that pleasure pain, no matter what the finance portion is. That pleasure pain is going to be the driving factor.
I think
When, you know, it's, when real estate, when life happens, real estate happens. And right now, you know, the relationship in our lead generation has to be worded in such a way of making it much more personal. This is very evident in Gary's, when he wrote shift on pages 26 and 27, really addressed this.
Yeah. When life happens, real estate happens. I like that.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, it kind of ties into everything that the conversations I've been having in alignment with what everybody's saying is we've really been in a market where we were logical about everything, financially driven about the price of it. And everybody out there that I was working with was about how much I'm going to make on my house. Just loving that mindset of how much their net's going to be. And they're looking at that from a financial, logical standpoint. And in the last 2 weeks, every conversation I've had has been an emotional conversation. Grandma and grandpa need to leave their house. He's on oxygen. She can't remember the last sentence she just had. And it's totally driven by emotion. And that's just it. It's not, oh my gosh, doom and gloom. It's just a change in how we're adjusting our actions. And like Eric was saying, it's motivation, understanding, but you've got to have that perspective to go in and go, okay, we're done with logic. And we're looking at the emotional perspective on why we're doing what we're doing now. 100%. Yeah, and perspective matters a lot.
Well,
So keep in mind, if people start going negative, they've owned a house for 5 years. They've done okay.
yeah.
They're okay. Like, it's not like you just got 2% each year. Like, you've seen significant changes that you should be. Let's look at this. You're not losing anything because technically it's not yours until you sell it. That money isn't yours until you either take it out or sell it. But then if you take it out, yeah, I'm not going to go down that road. But we've got to share perspective. If people are scared by this change, it's like, this is what the market does. And the market doesn't care who's in front of it. It's going to take care of whatever it wants to take care of, regardless of our preferences. So when we look at numbers, if I can encourage you guys to remove your preferences from what the data is saying.
That's what I was gonna say is, please have a big asterisk of education versus what you want that person to do.
Yep. Yeah. You get me going on manipulating. All right, next slide. All right, so I really want you guys to look at the first 2 columns here, a year ago and April 1st. So what we have is the month supply in the 7-county metro, and then you have the price points. So if you look at a year ago and you look to April 1st, most of them are very close or even less. So we'll never see these numbers again. Actually, I should never say that. I should take my own advice. Don't ever say never because it could change. And are they still having a hard time hearing me? So I'm going to talk louder because they might not hear me all the way up front here. So there's not much of a difference. And I think this is where the challenge is. If we're taking a quarter at a time or a year over year, look at the difference between April 1st and yesterday. That's big. Almost in a 2 month, couple of month period, this is a significant jump. Not so much there, but you look into these, you start to see the luxury market change dramatically. It's going to get squeezed from the affordability side, and then people saying, I'm not spending that kind of money, and everything is going to get squashed, right? Tim, what did you see on this?
Same thing.
Gosh, I nailed it, didn't I?
Yeah. And that 1.22, that was as of yesterday. Let's bear in mind that's still lower than anything we saw pre-COVID.
Yeah.
We're still in that crazy, like the last 2 years, like crazy low inventory. Because when I've talked to people non-real estate and they're asking me about the market and stuff, they want to, they'll say things that kind of allude to the idea that it's not a seller's market anymore. And I have to correct them. I'm like, it is. I mean, you almost have to triple the number of listings on the market and cut out the number of purchases being, made by 2/3 to get to balanced. That's still where we're at.
Yeah. And I've gone back and forth. I think a lot in terms of what I've seen over the past 2 decades is it seems like pendulums swing. So when you have a pendulum, it starts slowly at the top. And if all the things line up, that just continues to pick up its speed. I will say this, we've got different factors in today's economy, both demographically and financially, with equity than we didn't have in the previous recession. So we still have this significant demand. Actually, if you want to go to the next one, keep going. I want to actually go to the next 2 more. One more. Yeah, this one. Tim, I'm going back. I'm not skipping all that. But the reality is we have a significantly large demographic in the millennials that they're in their prime buying ages. So this is an unknown that we don't know how it's going to necessarily play out, but it's not a factor that we've experienced in a long period of time. So when we're talking about supply and demand, understand that there's a significant pool of potential buyers that are still there, that for a variety of reasons maybe aren't buying or are still looking to buy. So that could cushion this pendulum swinging faster. This is completely arbitrary from my perspective, so it's an opinion. But the reality is, when you look at the 5,000 macro, the big view, there's still plenty of people that still see this as an investment for the future. So, all right, Ashley, go back 18 or however many it was. All right, so this is just a visual of the month supply. Obviously, we're still, this is stupid. It is what it is. Next one. So Tim, I appreciated you included both of these. So Q1 appreciation, look at how strong it was. Super strong. Now go to the next slide. It flattened in May. So trend or mirage, I don't know. But my gut says the rates are going to have something to do with that because it affects affordability. So it affects affordability dramatically. And if you look into the macro with regards to the stock market and everything, it'll be interesting to see what happens with employment. I think we're super fortunate in Minnesota because our employment holds relatively strong when the coast seemed to be really struggling with unemployment. So, could change, yet that's been history. Tim, anything to add between those past two slides or numbers that you actually pulled?
I don't know if you included it, but there is a tendency for, I pulled these are monthly numbers. It's not like 3 months rolling. It's literally the month of May closings. You will see historically the median sale price monthly drops off in quarters 3 and 4 pretty much every year. And there could be various reasons for that, but you know, it's even without our changes in our environment the last couple of months, you would expect it would drop off, but the question would be, you know, will it drop off even more? It'd be an interesting number to watch.
So hopefully in each one of the offices, team leaders, this should be a monthly conversation because it's going to be fluid. So we've covered what Tim was just saying is the bottom points on this one. The median prices quarter 3 and quarter 4 are typically below quarter 1 and quarter 2. So next slide. We can go again. So he made 2 cases, one for the bubble, one for no bubble. Go back a slide.
If you look at every single hump in there, right at the peak of the hump is halfway through the year.
And that's what I just said. Yeah, you see that this is just illustrating what I pointed out, that Q3 and forward always drops. That's normal.
After 2012, that's crazy.
And my gut says it's going to look different over the next 12 months than it's looked the previous 10 years. Not scaring you guys. Don't get scared. It's going to be a good time. Trust me, it's going to be fun. All right. So a case for the bubble, obviously the prices have risen so much over the past 10 years, and particularly past 2 or 3. Prices driven by emotions, fear of missing out, and the fundamentals we're struggling to make sense of the fundamentals. And those are starting to get back in place because I'll share a couple of ahas hopefully at the end of a couple of things Gary said around rates and what he anticipates the government will do to kind of stage off that inflation to get too crazy. And then a case for more of the same. This is kind of what we talked about with the millennials, with the size of that pool. That could stave off some of it. And then housing prices and payments have not been, of course, there's adjustments to being made, but people aren't typically being put in a really poor situation. One thing that we will want to pay attention to, and maybe you guys have something to add, is we might start to see more ARM products come out, the adjustable rate products. If affordability is going to struggle a little bit, we might see more of those different products. Please talk to your lender before you start advising on whether that's a good idea or not. You two guys, you don't do this, but some lenders just want to get a mortgage.
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of people get burned. It's been in it long enough where people
Guys,
will get burned from
I
ours.
just want to talk a minute about that. We are not seeing in the marketplace. We have 0.4% of all loans that were done last month were ARM products because they're not pricing those lower than market rates. There isn't enough demand in the secondary market for those because they're looking to the future and are they going to, depending on what happens to the market, refinance it in 2 years, right?
Yep.
So you're not seeing, and as soon as you do talk to most people about ARMs, they're like, no, I don't want that. So.
And there can be calculated risks based on
Yeah.
situations.
Right.
So if they're planning on being in the house for years.
Yeah. Right.
And you believe that's 100% what's going to happen if you automatically get job transfers every 3 years, then who am I to say?
Right.
Well, and financial tools for people to determine the outcome have to change. The Fed yesterday had talked about in their update that they were going to start pushing more towards 40-year mortgages just because of the overall value of homes, that the 40-year mortgage will likely take the place of the 30-year mortgage by the end of next year, the second quarter of 24, because it makes sense with the purchase prices and for them to be able to save that amortized over 40 years as opposed to 30 will eliminate any of the change in the market, you know, any of the price increase in the market.
Yep.
Your payment will remain the same.
Which is the whole inflation interest rates conversation over the past 30 years. So what do we learn? Well, we don't know what's going to happen, which is awesome. So go ahead and advise your clients what to do. The point is, obviously, look at the data, be aware of the data, and go prepared to be able to provide context around what the data means. If we just go put numbers on the table of people that aren't in this every single day, heck, if you put this on the table with some realtors, that there's always an opportunity to learn more. So make sure you're aware of what the numbers mean based on what the numbers mean, not on what your client may or may not do because of what the numbers mean.
All of this conversation, numbers, the data is all very relevant to what's happening out there. And it doesn't change anything outside of wake up every day, show up and find friggin' people who are motivated to buy or sell. And if you just come in and do that every day, none of these numbers mean crap, because there's always people who are going to need to buy, want to buy, and are able to buy. You just
I have
gotta
a feeling that this conversation was offline. He wouldn't use friggin' or crap.
That's probably
No matter what the
But
market
that's
is, right?
it.
People
Like-
buy and sell all the time.
There's a whole
Yeah.
Conversation changes.
Yes.
people who slipped over deals the last 2 years because of the way the market was.
You're
Have to
just
adapt.
adjusting your conversation,
Adjusting the conversation and your
being aware.
where you stand. So that leads me into some of the things that I think are going to be required in a shifting market. So the first thing is what we've already talked about, which is have an accurate awareness of the numbers. What they actually mean, not what you want them to mean. Another one that I keep going back and forth on, because you guys ever read the thinking hats? That ring a bell. There's like different colors to the way people think. Well, needless to say, I'm a black hat. And a lot of people think that may mean I'm negative. Yet I'm not. So the way I kind of just in my mind process this is a healthy skepticism is going to prepare you for things that could happen along the way. And I think we have to look at it this way right now, because if we assume everything's just going to stay the same, we're going to be advising our clients on the past versus what we're seeing trending towards the future. And we also have to couple it with possibility thinking. And the way I look at this is just a circle. You just go back and forth between the two. And if we don't have both, when you're in business, particularly when you're an entrepreneur, you're putting your business at risk. Gary Keller, I actually wrote it down because he said, playing chicken little and expecting the worst may not allow you to grow as fast as you wanted to grow, but it's going to ensure that you don't go out of business. So there's times throughout history that it makes sense to you can take more risks. And then there's other times where you want to be more calculated because cash is going to be important. So when you're looking at everything, when you have this mindset, I'm not looking at this as a negative thing. Kind of excited, if I'm being completely honest. I've had a few conversations just in the past 2 weeks with a handful of agents that are super pumped. They're like, I'm ready for this to change because it's just gotten too out of whack, and they see the opportunity show up, because when things become challenging, do you become more valuable or less valuable? Depends how you show up, but in reality, they're going to be looking for more value and they're willing to listen. I look at it the same as leadership. Leadership is super, super hard when things are going great because everybody thinks you're an idiot. And I don't blame them. It's just like, you're too busy, right? But when things get tough, they're like, dude, can you keep me from quitting? Like, if you want to do the game, like if you want to play it, yes. Kind of simply put.
FSBO might not be as big of a thing tomorrow. You know, for sale by owner on Facebook, I can sell this. You don't need 2 agents. Is going to potentially see a little bit of a decline.
All of it's gonna shift, right? So when we look at this, I'm gonna encourage you to have a healthy skepticism. When I say healthy skepticism, it means throw whatever you want at me. I'm gonna prepare myself. But it's not, like, you're not gonna stop me. It's just gonna look different. The idea of labeling something good or bad, we just don't know. Some of your biggest, how many of you have had a super, I can't believe it, was it this bad? She told me she had to leave early. Thanks for being here, Ellie. We've all likely had some of our biggest challenges show up, and we can look back at them and be super grateful for those challenges. My gut says, if we look at it with a growth mindset, there's absolutely huge upside to challenges. Okay, so that the third piece, so the first one is an accurate self-awareness and accurate awareness of the numbers, healthy skepticism and possibility thinking. Third one is finding the opportunities. Tony brought it up. FSBOs might be something, an opportunity. Expires might be an opportunity. If we miss those conversations, not that they're not there, somebody else will find them. Okay. I'm cautious on saying this only because I don't want to be misinterpreted, but there are going to be plenty of people that choose to get out of the business because it's not going to be the same.
Bye-bye.
Oh, I thought you were.
Oh, thank you. Are you leaving? Gee, that was quick. That was an early decision. This meeting must be really going well if you're just like, I'm done. I'm not digging into it. The fourth one is the way I wrote it, if you watch Gary Vee, he's got a potty mouth, but it is what it is. He's smart. Micro speed, macro patience. So to your point, get up every day, do what needs to be done in the moment, and have patience for it to show up. Because the span of with the exception of a handful of buyers, your time with clients is shorter than it would be in a normal balanced market. You sell a house in a weekend versus 6 months. The relationship looks different. Communication looks different. So I think going in, it's like when you wake up every single day and expect everything to go perfectly, and the first thing that goes wrong, you get super frustrated. What if you woke up every single day saying, it's going to be an awesome day and there are going to be some challenges that I overcome? That first thing that happens, you don't get frustrated.
No, acknowledging control in your life is huge. What you can and
What you can and can't control, 100%. So I wrote down consistency, which follows the patience side of things. We've got to get in front of our clients in different ways. We've got to provide communication and value in different ways as the market shifts. So each one of your strategies might look a little bit different, but the reality is your plan can't be static right now. I'd write that one down. Nobody's doing it. But if you think that your plan from the beginning of the year is actually going to get you through the end of the year, I just tend to believe that the market is shifting too quickly, that holding on to that same static plan is actually putting you at risk from adapting to what the new, wherever we end up. I don't care what it looks like. Maybe it'll bounce back. I don't know. But the reality is it's not going to stay the same. So rather than taking 12-month chunks, I think we're in an industry right now that is probably a little bit more of every other month or every quarter that we really need to be evaluating what's happening. Okay. And then the last one I wrote down is being more intentional and aware of the connections that you make. So this is where you go have a connection, you put them into your database, and there's an intentional desire to follow up with them. Because when I look at it, when life is so busy, the fundamentals, we kind of fall short because it's propped up by other things that are making us money, more clients. But as soon as that goes away, those fundamentals become even more important, to Paul's point of following up. That's what it's really like over the long haul. It's follow-up, relationships. It's the consistent things on a day-to-day basis. Anything anybody would add to any of that? there's plenty to add, but the reality is, you look at the core of it, I think those are some fundamentals that really help you just prepare. looking forward.
I think one of the things, and this is drawing from industry, that when revenue's growing, companies don't focus on their processes and how they're actually running their business because profits are growing regardless. Real estate's the same way. When sales are going great, prices are rising, everybody's making money. We tend to lose sight of our process and what we need to be doing to be successful. So the shift is now time for us to take a look at how we're conducting our business.
Super valid point. Understanding your financials, understanding your economics. Are we looking at the expenses with regards to what's actually giving us a positive return? I think getting honest, again, if there's this place where I can just say, it's like, let's not be scared about this. It's just being healthy, running a healthy business. And we'll see, we're going to see how businesses have run with relatively low profit margins. They're going to have to make some significant decisions. So, Ellie, or either one.
Well, I just, 2020, March 2020, Gary said, start making care calls. I think care calls are just as important right now.
Agree.
All the time.
Always.
And everybody, that looks different. The way you make a care call is drastically different than how I make a care call. I already know that. So let's not get this idea in our head that it looks one particular way. We all show that differently.
I was just gonna say, I think the hard part right now for me is even though I prepared my sellers, like the balancing act.
Yeah.
Of course, they forget what you just told them. And now they're wondering why they're still on the market.
Yeah.
And you guys, I have 3 listings I just put on in that 400 range in Buffalo. All 3 of them have gotten offers for 20 grand less.
Whoa.
And they're not overpriced. I mean, well, obviously they're overpriced.
Sure they're not.
To the buyer they are, right?
Sure.
And then-
It's gone from this house has been on the market for 8 months to they don't have any offers. Let's
Right.
shoot it low.
Right,
Yeah.
and they're looking at that
Over
payment
the
because the
weekend.
rates have increased, but they still want that house that they first dreamt about when they were at
It's just
3.5%,
interesting that
you know?
it's like overnight. So
Yep.
even though
Literally
you
quick.
tell them, you prepare them.
That's
And,
what,
and we're in transition and now it's like, now what do I say to them now? Kind of, you know what I mean? Like,
you bring them all that other
yeah.
information and be like, look, your choice is to counter, reject, or accept. Like, based on the data, we don't know where it's gonna go. If rates keep going up, that might hurt you. If they stay steady, you may get full price. But the reality is there's a risk in each one of those. So I'm not making the decision for you. I'm gonna guide you based on what it's funny that you said that because there's 2 things that I didn't write down or didn't bring up. So if you guys looked at what I took from Shift when I was in 2008-9, I don't think, so sorry online if you can't see this, but there's a graph in Shift that has 2 different graphs. One's in a price declining market and one's in a stable price market. So up here would be overlisting the property, right? When you first put the property on the market, that's when the interest is the highest. So you actually see potential interest, but the longer it stays on, what you're going to see is people are wondering why it's still on the market. Right? So your opportunity is here. When you overprice, what's going to happen is that it's going to go even lower. And it finds itself, for those that have listed in a down market, this is super true because they're always behind the market in what the price is doing. So although they're taking a price reduction, they didn't take a big enough one because they're behind what the curve is suggesting. So when you have graphics for people that show what happens when you overprice, because what's going to happen in a market when the prices stabilize? You guys are going to get some pressure, aren't you? I want to list for hire. Ellie, if you don't list it for hire, I'm going to Eric.
I charge more, so they won't do that.
Well, that's another. You probably deserve that though. So, but the reality is, do you guys realize that your skill set in communicating that objection is going to be an important thing for you to be prepared for? Because when people say, I want to list it for hire, and you're taking all the data and saying, I'm seeing nothing that's going to show us that. Just like when money's short, I need you to do it for 4.5, or go lead generate, because your profit margins on a 4.5% listing is going to be a challenge to sustain it if you're having the cost of business increases the longer those listings stay on the market. So,
Well, the reason I said that is because I went on a listing appointment last week, and the brothers agent said that they would do it for 2%. And I said, well, you should tell them to do it for 0%, because they probably will. And, I went into the whole spiel, and they just, the data was super stingy, and I mean, I lost it, but it's amazing what agents are willing to do, and they're going to will themselves right out of the business by doing it.
there is going to be a period of time when the market shifts. It might be now, it might not be for 5 years. I'm going to keep that very clear, because I can't predict what we've seen over the past 2.5 years. There's no prediction yet. I'm going to take what I know now and see fundamentally what seems to make the most sense. And you're going to have a period of time when people they may struggle in business a little bit, and they're going to start shifting their decisions to try and maintain. Make sure that you understand what your value proposition is, and understand how to combat the objection around somebody else. I'm going to list it for $45,000 higher because I think I can get it. You know what you're going to say, because if you think about, this sticks heavily with my head, and everything that I do, every service that I use goes back to, what's my expectation of this service or this person? Because if you think about it, what is your service level based off of? What is it based off of? Their expectations of what you said you're going to do. Like, if they haven't sold for 20 years, they don't even know what service level is. But if you're going to say, I'm going to do these 5 things, and you deliver on those 5 things, chances are they're going to rate you very high. If you say you're going to do 10 things and you do 7, even though it's more than 5, they're probably going to say you didn't deliver on, so your service level is worse than the other one, because you didn't deliver on everything, even though you did more than the previous person.
You're not doing yourself justice, overselling yourself that you can't, perform on. It doesn't do you any
100%.
justice.
No. What happens is people take flyers. So you're putting your reputation on the line for a flyer. So understand what expectations you can set, because we might get into a point. This might be scary. How many have listed a property thinking it was going to go like that, and you barely had any showings over the weekend? What does that client look at you as? Like, what in the world is going on? Versus, guys, it's getting funky. We're going to try it here, but within a week, if we're not getting a lot of activity, we're going to have a different conversation to see what needs to happen to be competitive. Now they're looking at you like, whoa, you told me this might happen. So be cautious of the expectations we set, assuming something's going to happen in a certain way, because if it doesn't, whose fault is it? Unfortunately, in that situation, it's the agent's fault, versus, hey, our job is to expose the property, get as many people into the house. If we list it this, and if they don't come, that's on me.
Always be aware of the agents that you're doing transactions with as well, and what their expectations are and what you expect of them, because they may not have the right tools in their tool belt to succeed in this upcoming market. And so there may be opportunities for all of you guys to grow profit share trees, and for us to help grow the office, just based upon how someone is handling themselves or conducting themselves within a transaction.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I firmly believe that we are an organization that will equip people, if they want to go do the work, to run significantly strong, profitable businesses. Whether that's 2 million or 200 million, I don't really care what the goal is. The reality is if you're willing to plug in and you're a growth-minded person, we're the right spot. You could save a couple $1,000s being somewhere. That's just on us then, if you leave over a couple $1,000 because we're not providing value. So that took a hard left turn. That's all right. All right, I'm gonna just look at a couple of things because I don't have time to go through everything at this point. There's a benefit to having a recession if you're a good operator because it changes the competitive landscape, and you get to benefit from that when you operate well in that environment. I'm also going to give people grace. We talk a lot about growth in here and building businesses. If we are going into a recession, understand that it's super difficult to have your best year every single year, particularly when the market shifts. Give yourself a little grace, right? Because we're all just judging ourselves based on our previous year. The reality is I can go do all the right things and not everything may not show up that year. But if you take a 5-10 year perspective on things, all the right things you do in that given year, even if it's not your record year, is going to fulfill that long-term vision that you have. So be careful of this short-term judgment on having my best year every single year, because I can't find a business in history that's had their best year every single year. Anybody else have a case that I need to be aware of? Oddly enough, no, right? I already said the plan should never be static. I will say this as well, you have to go compete. It's okay, we're salespeople. Some people say I don't want to be a salesperson. You are in everything you do, and that's okay. Do it your way, but and competition doesn't have to be aggressive. So you have to want to win something. You have to want to get the best out of yourself if you're going to be competitive. So, closing thoughts. Was this valuable?
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully we use the context of the numbers and use those with clients. I always like to ask for a Haas because it makes me feel better. So, come on guys, that was funny. Yeah.
But your last statement about needing to compete, we have to remember that we're not just competing against one another or other brokerages or other people, we're competing against ourselves. And I know you said we can't, you don't have your best year ever, year after year after year. But that doesn't mean that you're not competing against yourself to be a better person and a better human. And your numbers may not be as good on paper from last year, but was your service? Was your reviews? Like, don't be afraid to compete with yourself.
I think that's the main person to compete against. Everything else will take care of itself.
Right, because if you want yourself to win and you make yourself a better person, then you're just helping the people that you surround yourself with.
But when you compete with yourself, what it allows you to do is be super happy for other people.
Yeah.
As soon as you start to hammer on everybody else for winning, you are going to lose. So you're focused. Great point, Jen. Thank you. Who else?
That one thing that you just erased in red, skepticism versus possibility. And I, for some reason, that just reminds me about risk and a healthy market, which is kind of like the overarching, my interpretation of what you said. The risk and reward ratio has been distorted over the last couple of years and maybe for a long time. But I think it's super healthy to talk about the risks of your seller choosing the wrong agent, going with the cheap one, hiring you because your value proposition, and having the mindset to analyze that to make proper decisions. And I think that is the resemblance of a healthy market, and it allows you to compete in and I just thought that was an interesting perspective on how we are transitioning to whatever's next, whatever it may be.
Just keeping a tab on it and understanding how you're making decisions and why you're making decisions.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, competition, I think in all forms, whether it's with yourself or with others, is healthy because it helps you refine and hone your skills and grow who you are as a person. And
what your business looks like.
As long as you're not putting all your value on yourself based on where somebody else is, because we're all at a different point in our journey. So if you value yourself less than somebody else that's doing 20 million and you're only doing 5, there's a bigger issue there.
Well, who said what other people think of me is none of my business?
I think a lot about you, though.
That's weird, Jake. We'll talk about that.
I make things weird. All right, one more.
Hey, Jake. Yesterday I was over at Maple Grove. It was interesting. Olivia Manson was there talking. The Hurricane team. Yeah, right? I medicated after. But the Hurricane team hasn't done scripts in over like 5-7 years. And they're now doing scripts with this change in the market twice a week. And yet they did almost 500 transactions last year alone, just their team.
Yeah.
I found that very interesting because the change is so dramatic. And they're gonna know exactly what they're gonna say. And so they're doing it twice a week now. Interesting.
Timely, right?
Yeah.
It's 2 weeks from now, it could be different.
Yeah.
So it's super timely. Think about it, of course it's strategic, but if you can anticipate some of the concerns of your clients, think of the level of service you get to provide when you show up prepared to be able to acknowledge what they're experiencing or what they're concerned about. The service level just, it feels a lot better. It's like, okay, this person got it. So, all right, guys, one more. Haley.
Motivational quote. Maya Angelou said, "You may experience defeat, but you are never defeated."
100% agree.
And that's not just having grace for yourself, that's knowing the difference between experiencing defeat and not allowing that to defeat you. It's knowing that all bad things are good. When things change, how can you take all the bad things and all the good things and use them to learn and to grow from them? You may experience defeat, but you are never defeated.
I don't have anything else to add.
Place to end.
Right there. Thanks for being here, gang.